Welcome to the Solutions Panel. This will be our final panel session for the event. And Will, I'm going to turn it on over to you as the moderator.
Thanks, Joel. And why don't we take the opportunity to give Joel a round of applause as the MC. Yeah. So I have some good news and some bad news. Nassim Haramein has become invisible. Nassim, wherever you are. So we'll continue and he'll join us coming from wherever he is right now. So welcome to the final session of the conference. I'm thrilled to see so many people still here. Often these events kind of peter out at the end. And I always think that's a great shame because, you know, like a good movie, the best part is the end, right? Best part of a joke is the punchline. So here we are at the concluding session. This is our solutions panel. So our focus is on practical solutions, bringing all the intelligence and the insights down to earth into doable initiatives. And we're going to begin with inviting the panel members to all focus on one solution that they are working with that may be of interest to you. We'll have some discussion on that, but I understand we are going to have a mic for people to ask questions. Is that correct? I think that's correct. I don't know where it's going to be. Over there?
No, that's not.
I understand we're not going to have a mic to ask questions. So there'll be silent questions. Just a couple of announcements before we get going. If you've got your... Behold, the manifestation has occurred. How was Alpha Centauri? If you still have your hymnals, you could open them to near the end, the second to last page. You'll see a picture of what I used to look like. And there's an error in my website spelling. It says Will Wilkinson. It's actually Will T. Wilkinson. So if you could insert that, then you can actually visit my website. So I'd like to begin with John. Is John at the end here? John, if you're ready, if you could begin by sharing briefly one initiative yours, a solution you see as being practical and necessary and inspiring in the world.
Has it been 10 seconds? I've decided to become a black hole.
You already are, Brad.
Well, I think most of you know by now that for me it's changing the corporations to get them out of this paradigm, this perception of maximizing profits is their responsibility. That's their goal, and to understand that what they must do is serve a public interest. They must serve you and me. And so my commitment is to keep writing books, to keep speaking out, to keep trying to organize people to get out there, all of you, each one of you, picking a corporation, any corporation, just pick a corporation you want to see changed, and then go get them, you know, and have fun writing social networking posts, however you like to do that, every day or at least once a week, to let that corporation know that you only will support them if they support a life economy, and then send that to all your social networking circles and ask them to send it to all their social networking circles, and them to send it to all their social networking circles. And as we do that, we change the corporations, that corporation. If each one of us in this room picks a corporation, and a lot of us will pick the same corporation, I'm sure, this will have a huge impact. It's that perception change, and they get the message. So myself, I'm dedicated to continuing to inspire, to urge, to pressure, to embarrass, to really motivate people to take that shamanic step of injecting new energy into business after I become a black hole.
Suck them all in.
I thought you were spitting us out.
That too.
So following up on that, we've heard from John about conscious consumerism and how a capitalist model doesn't have to be a bad model if we do it with consciousness and ethics. Yeah. And so I want to encourage, so my field is health and empowering women to have good health. And I want to remind everyone in this room that your doctor works for you. You are your doctor's boss. And if you don't like something that your doctor is doing, or you disagree with something your doctor or your other healthcare provider is suggesting to you, I would like you to fire them.
So, what's the question?
We're inviting each panelist to focus on one solution. So I know it's going to be difficult, but one solution that people can take away with them.
That people can take away.
Yeah, something to inspire. I think all of us want to come to focus so that we can...
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. I think that in general, if there's something I would recommend that people can do, and that would be to experience their infinities and their nature, their fundamental nature, their connection to this incredible world we live in, instead of wanting to escape it, to actually to integrate the material world that they are into at the deepest level of their existence, and to take the time every day to find that singularity within them, because that point of center, if you find it daily, then it's really easy to return to it when you're in the spin, and so to find that every day, and then to walk into the world from that point of center, from that infinite potential, in your mastery, because you're a miracle out there, and we tend to forget it. So find the miracle you are again, and walk in the world with that knowing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I'm directly involved in right now, and then I'd like to just tell you about those, and then make a recommendation. That one of the things is that we have the New Paradigm Institute, which is a wholly integrated auxiliary of our Romero Institute, that has been working to help develop a course, the first university-level course directed toward answering the profound philosophical and theological questions that are going to be posed to our human family by the actual discovery of life and an extraterrestrial contact or discovery of their existence. And that's Jose Gabriel Funes, and we are working at the New Paradigm Institute to begin this course in the fall at the university, the Jesuit University in Argentina, in Cordoba. So it would be helpful for you to try to find out about that course and get access to the reading list, and you can do that through contacting us at the Romero Institute, and we can hopefully provide that curriculum for you. Also, we're going to be doing the major confrontation at Standing Rock. The litigation is still underway there, and I'm going to be defending Chase Iron Eyes, the man who's been charged with instigating the insurrection against the oil companies. And so we want to be able to, I want you to pay attention to that. You can contact us again at romeroinstitute.org or Lakota Law, that's one of our other groups, to keep track of those litigations and to maintain showing your support for them during that course. And to follow up on Nassim, that actually one of the most important things we could ever possibly do is to try to have you, when you wake up in the morning, thinking about, oh, maybe what should I do today to make real what we were talking about, is really try to figure out what the best program is of actual meditation. I mean, it's non-denominational, just, spending the 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night, learning how to meditate. That's the concrete thing that Nassim is kind of talking about, of how you get yourself centered, how you open up those deeper channels in your own consciousness that you can bring with you into the world each day. And it's shocking and remarkable what it does. That you can imagine how awful I was to begin with. So I'm just saying, it's really a very important thing, and it's something everybody can do. Just do it in the morning and doing it at night before you go to sleep. And it's extraordinary to help shed light on what the issues are we're talking about here.
If we want to have a new paradigm, we first need to know what the flaw in the old one is. I've suggested to you that the flaw is that we allow some people to avoid adhering to the non-aggression principle. We call these people government, we call them corporations, and we are experiencing, I believe, the karmic backlash from this now, what's been called the death economy. And the only way to reverse that, in my opinion, is to really embrace the non-aggression principle at all levels and not support a system that uses aggression against some of us. The reason we have that, of course, is we think that aggression serves us. So my recommendation to you, and I'll be your partner in this if you'd like me to, is that you think carefully about what parts of this institutionalized aggression that you believe serves you, and then try to see if there's a way you can think of it differently. And if you have problems doing that, I encourage you to contact me through my website at ruwart.com. That's my last name.com, RUWART.com. And ask me the tough questions. I won't be offended. My role, my mission, is to give you as much information as I can to show you what I believe is the folly of institutionalizing aggression as we have done. I don't think we need it, and I think that the only way that the new paradigm will come about is if we recognize that aggression doesn't serve us at all. In fact, it harms us. So I invite you to interact with me. If you have any questions, please feel free. If you don't hear back from me in a short period of time, try again. I get over 1,000 emails a day, so I sometimes do miss one, but I don't want to miss yours. Thank you.
Yeah, what she said. When I had a company in Silicon Valley, and when Regis McKenna was a famous marketing guy down there, and he had this expression, he said, when people see something the first time, it's an anomaly. When they see it a second time, it's a coincidence. And when they see it a third time, it's a pattern to them, and they start really paying attention. I'm glad there are at least two of us here talking about this particular solution, because if I had a genie come out of a bottle and offer me a wish, my wish would be for more wishes. And then I'd have a whole bunch. And since I get one solution, the solution would be a world based on the non-aggression principle and individual sovereignty. Because as Kimberly and I and our colleagues are working to bring out the new energy devices and the agricultural solutions and the cures for diseases and on and on and on, we find resistance everywhere, and it all traces back to the authoritarian state. That's what empowers it. So the key to actually having access to these cancer cures and to cheap, clean, universal energy and on is the non-aggression principle. So I invite you to not tolerate any inconsistencies within your own moral compass. You may have to tolerate inconsistencies in your behavior, like paying taxes and having it go to such atrocious things for a while. But in terms of your own moral stand, I invite you to keep up with this quest until you really feel 100% clear and confident about aligning your commitment with your moral center. Thank you.
When I welcomed each of you here yesterday morning, it was just very inspiring to see how many had felt the call to come. And, you know, when you look at these people here, marvelous researchers, very passionate about bringing a transformation to the way things are conducted on little planet Earth. It's obvious each of these feel a deep calling, and they've been true to it. And I know that each of you have a calling as well. You each heard it, you responded, and you came here. And you're every bit as important and entwined in what this whole conversation's been about. I did mention that certainly I believe that we live in a conscious universe that's benevolent. I believe there is a creative source that is intensely loving and intensely personally engaged with us here. And reaching out to what is highest within us does indeed make us the light of the world. And I would encourage everyone to at least consider that as a practice, do that every day, and be willing to listen, and even be willing to be non-attached to what might come to you when you make that request to show me what you'd have me know. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? Who would you have me meet, and what would you have me say? Be willing to listen, and it might startle you to know that what you've been doing for a long time suddenly may not be what is the next best thing for you to do. But I would just ask you to consider being non-attached, because there may be the next best thing for you to do. I also wanted to share that when we come into contact with somebody who seems very distorted in their conduct, there is a simple appeal that can be made to them that can bring about a realignment. And I'll use an example. Once when I was with my younger daughter, who at that time was about 6 years old, there was a gentleman who was trying to dissuade me from the new energy movement scene and what that's been about. And he had a weapon and waving it in front of me and my daughter. And I had to get calm for a minute, and then I posed a question to him. And I said, I'd like to ask you, who was your highest model of thought and behavior? And this man suddenly became very confused. And I repeated the question, who was your highest model of thought and behavior? And he said to me, Jesus. And I said, is your conduct aligned with the conduct of Jesus. This man literally started to spin around in circles while my daughter and I peacefully walked away. So I suggest that that simple appeal, without violence, but that just goes to the root of what we're about. Either we are aligned with life, or we're living some type of a painful fantasy. And we can help our brothers and sisters become realigned with life.
Well, thank you all. We're going to dive deep into this for the remainder of our time. I'm going to invite all the panelists to ask questions of each other to drill deeper into these initiatives. So I'm going to repeat what they are so we can remember. But before I do that, I'd like to just emphasize the theme of our event, which from the beginning I know has always been interaction. And I know you're looking at us up here, we're under the lights, but I just invite you to look at each other. Just turn and look around the room, see who you're with. And just acknowledge that each one you're looking at is a delegate. And they represent a constituency of hundreds and thousands of people who are on this frequency in one way or another. A couple of hundred people in this room represent many thousands. It makes a difference when we recognize that connection, doesn't it? We're many. So the next hour or so is going to be like what you do when you open a book. I'm a writer, I love books. I mean, you look at it this way, there's nothing there. Then you open it up, and the magic happens. So we're going to open up these 7 initiatives. I'll repeat them. John is working towards a transformation relative to corporations. And Jennifer is partnering with your doctor. I thought partnering was a kind word. Nassim, find the miracle that you are. And Daniel, the New Paradigm Institute and meditation. And Mary, embracing the non-aggression principle. And Foster, individual sovereignty. And Joel, aligning with life. Those are 7 powerful solutions. So in no particular order, as you feel moved, I'd invite the panelists to inquire of each other for more depth on these specific initiatives. And I think the image I have here is like a spear. A spear works because it has a very sharp tip and a strong shaft behind it. I don't really like the term shaft, it's like you get shafted, but we want something sharp here, so let's help each other sharpen what our particular solution is. So, anyone?
I'll start. This is a question that I want to ask everyone to comment on. So there's so many original ideas and new ways of thinking about things, and I was hoping each panelist could share with us what your thoughts are about death.
Interesting.
So let me just ask, because we've set it up one way, and Jennifer's suggesting something a little different, and
I didn't do that on purpose.
which is fine. And I just want to be respectful of everyone involved, rather than assume it's okay to go down that direction. Do we feel good about introducing another initiative, or would we like to stick with the ones we have?
Well, I think what I was saying was, how would you take the initiative that you've offered and apply that, your view to the inevitable? One thing that we know for sure is we're all going in the same direction, right? This is something that's going to happen to all of us, and commenting on it from the point of view of your sort of new paradigm.
Yeah. Maybe we'll just
But we
leave
don't
it to
have
the
to go there.
panelists if you'd like to field that.
Well, I think of the non-aggression principle as something that's very life-giving. As you saw, countries and societies that have more freedom also have a longer life. And that's something I feel that, we could even have more of. So one of the reasons I have focused on regulation in the healthcare industry in my new book, Death by Regulation, is because working in the pharmaceutical industry, I was able to see how the regulation really kept cures from people. It really kept new life-saving drugs from people. And in addition, it kept life-saving information about nutritional supplements that might be used for these same purposes away from people. And of course, as a researcher, I watched people concoct things in their kitchens because they weren't allowed access to them, and possibly even risking poisoning themselves as they strove to have a chance at saving their lives. So to me, that idea of death is very real. Aggression brings death, because all of these regulations, of course, could only be enforced by aggression. So that's my connection between death and the non-aggression principle, which is one reason I urge you to consider it, because it's really a matter of life and death. Yeah, premature death, thank you.
I'd love to comment on that for a moment. I've had the opportunity to live a very adventurous life, and particularly physically, and so I had a lot of close calls with death that at a pretty young age that really made me treasure so deeply the opportunity to be here in this body on this incredible planet at this time. And I'm blessed with many loving relationships and a wonderful family that I so deeply connected with that it's the most uncomfortable part of imagining dying to this particular plane for me. And so when Kimberly and I sat down to decide, okay, are we going to make this movie or not? Because it's going to be dangerous. We went very deep with each other, and soon it was obvious that, people had told us, well, why are you doing that? You guys could be sipping Mai Tais on a beach in Tahiti the rest of your life. Why would you do this? So, that would be death for me, given the situation that my children and grandchildren and my species and my planet are in. So we were both very clear that we wouldn't feel alive unless we were fulfilling our purpose. And in my research, fortunately, my scientific research has led me to believe, I'm not certain, but I can't assure anyone, but all of my scientific research has led me to believe that I am a metaphysical energy being who has cohered all these molecules for this particular period of time, but that metaphysical being will continue to evolve. And so on a very practical level, on a very spiritual level, neither Kimberly and I experience fear of dying. We would be longing, if we were on our way, I would be longing to have more time with our loved ones. But at a core soul level, there's just no question that when I'm in touch with my sense of myself as light, as purpose, that the issue of death reminds me to be careful, but it doesn't inhibit me in any way. It actually empowers me. So thanks for asking.
Well, I'll venture a journey into this. I think, first of all, I also believe that we're immortal. Our spirit's immortal, our soul's immortal, and I think quantum physics teaches that also. I think modern science is coming to similar conclusions in different ways. However, I've done a lot of workshops on taking people through past lives and into future lives and through the death in other lives to know that they will come back again, It's a beautiful experience to go through a past life and see yourself dying and know what you went through then and that you'll be back, that you're back here now. And having said that, there's always this prospect that at some point we will end up on our deathbed, so to speak. And for me, being on that deathbed, I want to look back and say, you know, like I was taught, my dad was a soccer coach. I played soccer. I was brought up believing, you know, at the end of the game, you collapse. You're totally worn out. You've given it everything. On that deathbed, I want to totally collapse. I want to feel that I've given this life everything, that I've experienced it to the fullest, that I've been one with the planet, that I've been one with myself, that I've really experienced it, and I've done everything I possibly could to create a better world for my grandson and all the children of all of his brothers and sisters on every corner of the planet. Because I think we have to know at this point in history that our grandchildren can't have a good life unless every child growing up in Botswana and Bolivia and everywhere else on the planet also has a good life. That's new. Used to be. Used to be all Ashland had to worry about was Ashland, basically, and then all the United States had to worry about was the United States. But today we know it's the entire planet, maybe the entire universe. In fact, it is the entire universe because the planet is the universe, as we've learned. And so to lie on that deathbed and look back and say, I've given it everything I could, and I've done everything possible to pass on to the future generations of the mosquitoes, as well as all the plants and animals and rocks and rivers and every bit of Pachamama. I've done everything I could to pass on the very best possible future. That to me will be, I would hate to think of lying on that deathbed and looking back in any other way, wouldn't you? Yeah. So, yeah.
I'm scared to death. This is a profound question. I mean, you know, the concept of death, I deal with it with stars. You know, there's this misconception that stars die. This is a very sad thing. Think about it. Like the twinkle things that are out there, like beautiful, and that they die. It's called a supernova, right? And it's thought to be that the star explodes and then it's dead, right? And I've always had an issue with this because, like, it doesn't add up. Because when you look back to where that star was, it's absolutely not dead. In fact, there's a large, very energetic object called a pulsar, or a black hole right there, right? And so what we observe has been misunderstood, you know, from a change of state to a thought of death. And so I always challenge the scientific community to show me anything that dies, anything that stops, anything that ends, anything that, you know, because we haven't ever seen like the decay of a proton, right? Like so where is it that things end? All we've seen is a change of state. Even, you know, when we say somebody dies, right? Like every atom that this person has ever been made of, which, you know, you're shedding billions of them as you're dividing 1 million cells a second, you know, and you're leaving this trail of information of atoms behind, and when you change state, you basically, you know, are still there because every single one of your atoms is still happening, you know, it's just changing state. It's re-entering a larger set of information we call the Earth. And so all this information that you are, and everything that you've ever been, right, is actually recorded in the structure of space-time, and the information is still present, because we know very clearly in physics that no information can be lost, and this actually leads to the holographic principle in black hole theory, but we won't go into that. So basically, you know, this change of state is happening every single minute of our life. We're constantly changing state. We're constantly, you know, moving to new sets of information. And so, you know, like Foster, I've been a very physical person. Like I love extreme sport. You know, I've skied extreme skiing. I'm a solo climber. I climb without ropes. I love motorcycles. I love going like at high speed. And so I love playing with that edge of the transformation, because in that space, and that can be anything for anybody, it doesn't have to be an extreme moment, but in that space I know that life prevails no matter what, right? And in that place of knowing that life prevails, I know that I am always safe, and I can proceed and do what I need to do without fear. And that's what keeps me going when I look at my children, when I look at my family, when I look at my friends, when I look at my staff and my laboratory, and I know that no matter what, everything is okay. Everything will prevail. Life will prevail.
When I was a senior in high school, I was driving to school with a friend and coming around a blind curve, and a big garbage truck cut right in front of me, right across my lane, and I had about a second to reflect that I'm going to die, and the collision happened, and I was out and had the full life review in color. Seemed like it lasted hours. Next thing I know, I'm back in the car. Steering wheel collapsed from the force of the blow of my sternum, and maybe a fraction of a second had gone by in Earth time. So coming out of that experience, is very clear to me that there's much more to life, real life, and that there's really nothing to be afraid of, because our real existence, it is eternal, and mind is eternal, and our consciousness is eternal. And everything proceeds from a thought, everything. So the mind is primal to anything physical. There is a statement in ancient scripture that says, "And the last to be overcome shall be death." Now, my understanding is that on the more advanced planets, where the ideals we've been talking about this weekend actually are in place and have been in place for a long time, including very high ethical conduct of all the inhabitants, enlightened self-governance with no need for external authority, and an exceeding understanding of the spiritual source of life, that on those planets, physical death is rare. That when the fulfillment of the function of the body has served its term, that there's simply a translation to the next turn of the spiral. I think it's very, very beautiful, and I feel very certain it will be the case on this planet as well. It may take us some time to get there, but maybe within our lifetimes we'll start to become aware of this, where some amongst us actually leave maybe in like a brilliant flash of beautiful light, maybe even in the midst of their loved ones. And it's a joyous celebration. But I do think that that is our eventual heritage, because even physical death itself is non-aligned with eternal life. So let's use the gift of the body while we can for a noble purpose, and I think we're all striving toward that, and let's support each other along the way, but have no fear with it. And I love the life with gusto that John said. If you're going to be beat up and sliding into home plate head first and going like, wow, what a ride, that's a great way if you're going to go out that way too. So thank you.
So Jennifer, this was your question of the panel, and are you satisfied? Do you have anything to add?
We didn't hear from Daniel.
If you were willing.
Well, sure. I guess I would start with saying, thank God for LSD. Our generation has been blessed by having an insight into the experience. I was actually taking my last final exam for Harvard Law School. I had been blessed by being chosen by Professor Abe Shea, who had drafted the Cooper-Church Amendment to cut off all funding for the Vietnam War. And I was selected to be one of the 5 point briefers for the U.S. Senate from Harvard Law School to go and present to them why this was constitutional and how we could do it. And because of that, I was one of the 5 that were given take-home exams for our final exam in my last year of Harvard Law School. And I went with a very dear friend of mine, a classmate from law school, and we went up to a place called Magic Mountain, Vermont. And it was high springtime. It was 30th of May of 1970. And I was in the kitchen, this beautiful mansion with butcher board tables and copper pots. And I was sitting with one of those old Selectric typewriters and typing away on my final exam. And his fiancée, who had been my college sweetheart, actually came into the kitchen and she said, Danny, would you like a cup of tea? And I was just typing away on my final exam, and I said, no, I don't do tea, caffeine and stuff. She said, oh, no, she said, this is a herbal tea. And I said, well, okay, all right. So she brought me a cup of tea. I'm typing away on my exam, which was and I got to and it was getting easier and easier. I had just sort of discerned this kind of unitive principle that if I just pursued this in the answer of every one of the questions, it all worked out. And she came over to me and she said, Danny, would you like another cup of tea? And I said, yeah, that was fine. Yeah, I'll take a second. So she gives me a second cup of tea. And I finished it, and I get all done with my exam, and I pushed the typewriter away. And I was saying, here I am. I'm all done with Harvard College and Harvard Law School. I've got accepted the #1 corporate litigation law firm in the world to go down to. This is the first moment I've had to kind of sit back and reflect. And I looked up and I saw this sunbeam coming through the kitchen. May 30th, you little dust particles drifting in it. And I remembered, in fact, I fell completely out of time. And I fell back to when I was like 4 years old, sitting on the floor in my living room. And I looked up and I realized that at that time when I was 5 years old, I was reflecting upon when I was looking and seeing these dust motes floating in the exact same kind of a sunbeam, and I was reflecting upon how much they looked like stars. And I was actually experiencing that exact same moment back when I was a child. And then it went away, and I was back sitting there at the age of 25 in this beautiful kitchen with the sun shining in. And the most extraordinary thing about, other than that nature of that experience, was I realized that I was exactly the same, in both moments. And then I realized that there is a point of experience from which you go through different experiences at different times, but it's always the same viewer. And then I went outdoors and laid on this big boulder and lay down on the rock, and I realized the clouds were going over, and I suddenly realized that the clouds weren't going over, we were going under, that we were kind of rotating underneath this big atmosphere, and it kind of dawned on me that this perspective was new. And then I just lay back, and actually literally I lay back onto the boulder, and this little muskrat came up and came up onto the side of the boulder and looked over at me, and I turned and looked at it, and at first it was kind of startled, and then it realized, no, it looks like it's going to be okay. And he came up and lay down on the rock next to me, and we laid there like this. And I just let go of all the tension, all the anxiety, all the planning and structuring and working to save the world, and just drifted back into a little pinpoint of light. Some of you know what I'm talking about. And then I realized that I didn't have to stay in control anymore. That you could let go completely, that we weren't in charge of making the plan to get here, and we aren't in charge of the plan afterwards. That there is another source of all of this, and that we can be confident that we will be back again together.
I'll have what he's having.
Get me some of that tea.
Oh yeah, you haven't answered it either.
Well, I'm aware that our neighbor Anthony, who's 89, is dying right now. And Anthony wouldn't be at a workshop like this, but he would shovel the snow out of your driveway. And Anthony, I don't think meditates, but he would bring you some firewood. He's a dear, elderly man. He's been our neighbor for as long as we've lived where we are, and his family's with him right now, and I think he's in his last little while. So my immediate experience of the topic is pretty close to home. And looking out at the crowd and my colleagues here, I'm aware that all of us are heading towards that moment. And I just think it's so profoundly inspirational that we're being invited to see it as a gift and not a tragedy, and that the takeaway is to not just seize the day, but seize the moment. This is the moment of life. One of my favorite questions is there life after birth? Or as Mel Gibson said in Braveheart, not every man dies, but not every man truly lives. And
Yeah, just to add to that, I really enjoy spending time with people over 90 and 95, and I think that everyone should have a friend in their late 90s. And my dear friend's friend mom, 90-something, I think she was actually 97-year-old mom, passed away, and my daughter's preschool teacher came over for a party at our house, and I was saying that I felt really sad that this friend had passed, and the teacher said, "Isn't that a wonderful thing? I'm so glad." And I had never heard someone say it that way, like it actually, you can be sad and it's not a bad thing to die. That felt a little bit like a revelation for me. And one of the things that when my mother passed away very suddenly, she was very healthy. She had just come back from Mexico where she'd been giving a talk. She was riding her bicycle that day and she had a stroke. And so many people, and it was devastating for the family. It was very surprising to all of us. And people came and brought us food, which was such a wonderful thing that people do when someone dies. And my friend's mom died, and this is actually somebody in Ashland who I didn't get a chance to tell this to, but I didn't bring her a meal, and I remember feeling every day like I really needed to bring my friend Michelle a dinner, like how so many people did. Right at the same time that her mom passed, a woman in Ashland who I didn't know had a baby, and she had toddlers at home, and she was feeling totally overwhelmed, and she was asking people, "Oh my God, how do you deal with the exhaustion of having these kids?" And I wrote back and said, "I don't know, you have 3 kids under 4, and I think you need help, and may I bring you dinner?" And I brought her a meal. This isn't somebody I know. I didn't see her. I left the food outside. I brought my daughter with me. And then another friend had a baby, and I brought her a meal. And I realized that I was bringing those dinners and giving that support to these new mamas as a way of honoring Arlene, who had passed away. So I'm not saying anything coherent here. I'm not nearly as articulate as all of these incredible people on this panel, but I guess that I think that there's something to helping and supporting people who are coming into the world and helping and supporting people who are going out of the world, and that's kind of can be a really beautiful circle.
Beautiful. Well, it's amazing we can consider this topic in such an uplifting way, and I really appreciate you bringing this up. It actually reminded me of something that Woody Allen said. You don't generally think of Woody Allen and inspiration, but he was talking about a near-death experience he had where his whole life flashed in front of his eyes, and then he realized that it was someone else's life. And I think he also said that he doesn't mind the idea of death, he just doesn't want to be there when it happens. One thought I had, just to steer in a direction here, is something Foster said about individual sovereignty, because in some ways you could say that a lot of people are kind of sleepwalking through their lives and they're kind of half dead. And so I think awakening, the way we're participating, is really awakening to what life is about. And we could also say we're enslaved or we're free. So the term individual sovereignty seems to sum it up. I would love you to drill a little deeper into that, Foster. I know it's so dear to your heart. What can we take away here? Because this is the huge question in a world that seems so disempowering. What can I do? How can I feel empowered in my life? So please elucidate us a little more about that.
Well, thanks. It's my favorite topic, you might have guessed. I don't know what to say about it right now. Let me just take my 10 seconds on that one. There have been 3 major discoveries in my life that were absolutely pivotal. Not like I was the guy who discovered it, but in my life, I discovered And first of all, it was when I was introduced to Aikido. I had studied various martial arts, and I was an athlete. I was interested in self-defense, so I tried various arts, but I couldn't commit myself 100% to any of them because they were all about injuring or destroying someone else's life. And then I mentioned that to a psychologist friend of mine, and he's, because I was thinking I'm going to have to develop this martial art myself, and he said, well, you could do that, or else you could come to one Aikido class with me because somebody already did that. So I went to one class and met my teacher, experienced this very powerful martial art of absolute gentle, loving care. And I was so moved that I went home and threw up for about half an hour. And what I was throwing up, I wasn't sick, I was throwing up the knot of tension, of fear that I had been carrying all along about protecting myself. And is there a way to do that without selling out my soul? And I finally found a path where you can be limitlessly powerful and gentle at the same time. So that was my first one, and that has literally shaped every day of my life since then, and I was 23 at the time. And my second aha moment was when I saw a free energy device working for the first time and running on just the energy of the plenum. And Kimberly was with me, and we both just started to cry for who knows what all reason. It was a relief. It was proof of the notion that we live in a world of infinite abundance. And I could feel the potential for humanity that even one of these existed. And then I realized, oh, it's operating by the same principles that Aikido is. It's honoring the torus as the sustainable pattern of energy flow. And then accessing that in a resonant way rather than a violent way. So then the third one for me was when my son introduced me to the Liberty Principles. And when I was done arguing my old worldview and let that go, there was a moment of release, a moment of personal liberation that it's like when you're not afraid of dying anymore. I knew that I had found what I was looking for. In terms of, just like when I found a gentle martial art of Aikido that accessed infinite energy, it was the same way with this, that I could apply myself in alignment with this principle and not have to sell myself or anyone else out in any way. So I just really want to echo the encouragement that Mary said before about as you're investigating these things, when you come up against the yeah, but what about, which are really good to do every single one of those. That's what I've been doing rigorously for the last 10 years. And what excites me so much, you know I'm a pretty thorough researcher, so I've gone into every aspect of this very deeply, and it always has come out the other side with the assurance that, yes, there is a way where I don't have to violate anyone, except if I have to defend myself and my Aikido's not good enough or there's too many people or something like that. There is a way that my soul can be whole while I am doing the work that I'm here to do. So I encourage you to be patient with yourself. Keep entertaining the ideas to whatever degree you're willing. And when you have a question like that, think to yourself, okay, I don't see, it's not obvious how we could go by without a monopoly police department or a monopoly on money or a state to protect us or something like that. Keep going, and if you're really interested, go to the resources. Go to the Liberty section of our website where we've got all the books, we've got all the articles that lay out each one of these things. And if you really want to know, if there's an inner conflict that doesn't feel resolved to you, simply keep going and contact me if you don't find that resolution. Because to me, this is the liberation of humanity, because we're honoring each individual torus, starting with every cell in our body, then to our own torus, and then seeing every single being as a sacred torus, as a sovereign means to rule. So it kind of came about around kings and so forth, we're the sovereigns because they were ruling. But we're learning to transcend that now and realize, like Joel was saying, it's the self-governance, it's the rule of over self or with self that is the key to everything else, and not violating others' rule of self. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks.
I think for many of us, the idea of rule of self sort of confronts our day-to-day interaction with corporations. If there's something that could be disempowering, I think corporations could be it. And John, I'd love you to piggyback on this since you introduced this, having a new relationship with corporations. How can we feel our individual sovereignty in the world the way it is with corporations as they are? How do we do something other than complain or resist, kind of in line with Jennifer's idea of holding your doctor accountable? How do we do this with corporations? What are some practical tips?
Well, first of all, I'm kind of impressed with Jennifer. Maybe we'll be running for president next time because, after all, the fellow who's president now got there by just firing people. So if you just fire your doctor, couldn't resist. Well, actually, I could have, but decided not to. I was free will here. So what was the question? Oh, yeah. Corporations. Well, I think that, the key here is that it's not so much about corporations, government, business, private versus government. It's about the overview of what kind of a system we really want to create for ourselves here on this planet. And I think we're all coming to the conclusion that the system that we have created has perhaps served us fairly well, but its time has ended. And someone the other day mentioned Henry Ford, I think, said, if they asked me if I'd asked them what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. But he saw that the cities, somebody mentioned it, I think it was you, Danny, maybe the cities were being polluted terribly by horses. Somebody mentioned that. That was you, horse manure.
The future president of the United States.
Right, the future president of the United States. So Ford saw that we needed to enter a new kind of paradigm where the automobile was seen as the solution to the pollution problem. And it was, for a while. And then it became the pollution problem. And I think we can say that about our whole system. The system that we created has done amazing things. I mean, Nassim is able to do the things to look at the other universes the way he can, partly because of all the science that's evolved up until now, partly because, and all of us are here because of the technologies, because of the wealth of our system that's brought us this ability to be here. And it's gone a little too far, like the automobile. And so it's time, we are in a dynamic system. It's time to move on. It's time to change. And so the real question is, how do we envision that? And not so much about what size corporations, what kind of corporations, but the guiding principle behind all of this. And to recognize that all of the people out there, or most of the people out there, really have a deep feeling for the fact that we need to change. I meet with a lot of CEOs, a lot of business leaders, and they all recognize that this system's failing us. Most of them do, the ones that I meet with, and they just don't know how to change it. And as I said earlier, they're afraid that if they lose a 0.5% of market share, they'll lose their jobs and be replaced by someone who only cares about market share. And then there's the sociopaths who don't give a damn about any of that, but they define themselves by success. And right now we've said success is maximizing profits, so that's what they strive to do. But if we said success is making a better world, is it creating a love economy or a life economy, that's where they would go. So the real question here, the real challenge, if you want to call it that, the real opportunity is for all of us to understand that we are living on a very loving planet, in a very loving universe, and somehow we've created a perception that that isn't the case. that it's aggressive and threatening. But we're understanding now that that's not true. And so it's time to turn it around. It's time to get this new perception. And I just take another minute here to, I'm a great student of history. I love history, and I particularly love the French and Indian War and the American Revolution because I grew up with a background in that. And I'm often taken by how in 1773, all the colonists in America believed that the British were invincible, couldn't be defeated. George Washington remembered 20 years earlier during the French and Indian War, he'd been at the Battle of the Monongahela in what is present-day Pennsylvania, and he'd seen the most powerful British army of the time under the greatest British general of the time, Braddock. Huge army, crack British army, defeated. Braddock was killed, the general, and most of the men in the army were killed or terribly wounded and terribly defeated by a small handful of Indians with a few Frenchmen with them. So Washington went before the Continental Congress and he said, they're not invincible. All we got to do is hide behind trees. They're standing out there in those long lines of red-coated targets. All we got to do is change our perception of what it is to confront the British. I think we're at a time like that now, and it's unfortunate maybe to be using a war analogy, but I think maybe it's appropriate too, because I think in a way we're at war with ourselves over how we relate to this planet, and the corporations are right at the front lines of that. And so the idea of changing that perception, and all it took was Washington's one speech. All it took was Milton Friedman in 1976 turning things around. It doesn't take that much, it's a tweaking. And it's time to tweak, and it's time to understand that it's really about the whole shebang. Whether it's a big bang or a little bang, I don't know, but it's the whole bang. And it's time to see it as this whole bang, and it's not about whether we're privatizing or whether we're government or whether we're the big corporations or little corporations or Federal Reserve banks or other kinds of banks. Yes, those things are all important, but those are just the symptoms of this cancer that's been eating away at us. And what we need to do now is dig down in, get rid of this cancer, and create a healthy big bang. Bang.
So I'm sure you felt, as I did, as John led us through that transformational exercise, that there was so much more transpiring than his words. The words were a carrier, but did you feel the movement? And it's why we're here, to experience a change, not just talk about it. And John introduced our work together really as being all about a change in perception. Here we are. And this is what we'll take with us from here. And it's amazing, these panelists have walked in the fire. There's a man sitting to my right here who is an expert at going toe-to-toe, working across the aisle, knowing when to hold his position, when to fold or do a different strategy. And Daniel, if you're willing, I'd love you to say a little more following on from this, because we're getting into hands-on stuff here. How do we actually do this in the real world? And you've done this all your life. And I know we respect that, and we want you to rub off on us.
Well, it's interesting. I ended up being extremely fortunate, actually, in getting to. I've told this story once before at another place that I was originally going to be an astronaut because I wanted to go into outer space where these other beings were, to get to meet them. And I figured, well, I was going to go into outer space. I had to fly airplanes, so I was going to go to the Air Force Academy. I didn't have the slightest intention of ever hurting anybody or dropping bombs on anybody or anything, but I thought that's where I should go. So I applied to the U.S. Air Force Academy and ended up being #1 in New York State for the senatorial appointment. And I went down to talk to Kenneth Keating, the United States Senator, that went down into New York. I grew up in Lake George, up in the Adirondack Mountains down there, 6 Indian Nation country up there, French and Indian Wars. And went down to New York City for the first time ever, and went in to see Kenneth Keating, and he asked me why I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. And I said, well, because I want to go into outer space. And he went, yeah, everybody does now. And he said, well, why do you want to go into outer space? I said, well, get to meet all these beings that are there. And he looked at me and he said, you actually believe that there are other beings out in outer space? And I said, well, certainly so do you. You're a United States Senator. I mean, you're not stupid. And he was totally shocked by that. And so I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply that you were stupid, so I know you know that there are. And anyway, so he was shocked. He confessed to me that he'd already given the appointment to the son of one of his major contributors. And he just said it to me just like that. He said, but you can go to the Naval Academy. He said, you can go to, I'll give you the appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy. I said, I'm not into boats. I said, I'm into airplanes. So he said, okay, you can go back to your congressional district and get your congressional appointment. And the congressman gave the appointment to the son of the Republican mayor of Glens Falls. So I decided I should become a lawyer. I said that I guess that the system's a little bit out of tune here. I said, because this is wrong for them to be doing that. And so I figured that I would take a short break and be a lawyer first, and then get back into going into outer space. And so I figured it would take a little while to just retune the system. And then I discovered that the system wasn't out of tune, that it was playing a completely different song than we've been taught. And that this issue of, it took me a long time to figure this out, that it was this system of the corporations and as I've said, the alienating of any kind of responsibility of the people who own the assets of the company and the management that runs it and the board of directors that run them. They've all been given legal immunity for anything that they do. And they've created this creature, this corporate creature that just goes after the maximization of profit. And it has no soul, it has no conscience, and it will just devour the resources of the planet. We've created this thing that we've got to get rid of it. We have to stop this, and we have to undo it. And fortunately, Pope Francis has recognized this. I mentioned in passing that in his papal encyclical on global climate change, he has identified transnational corporate capitalism as the cause, the proximate causation of the global climate change that's threatening us all now. And he said that we have to have a completely different system. We have to have a completely different system. And he said that the economic system of transnational corporate capitalism has consciously generated an entire philosophy of postmodernism, of using our intellect to deconstruct all of the basic beliefs that you have to formulate in order to have an understanding of what's right and wrong. They've totally disassembled any theory of right in any kind of absolute way, he said. And so that we have to take on this issue of postmodernism and be able to understand that there is, in fact, a method by means of which human beings can access the truth. And that has to do with this process of meditation and actually experiencing in our own individual lives what this state of consciousness is. That, as I'd mentioned, that our generation has been blessed with having been given some insight into, and that this is how you regenerate that experience. And we have to work together to try to figure out how we disassemble these corporations, because you can't just go to Congress and ask them to do it because they're being bribed by all these corporations. You can't go to the Supreme Court or the courts because they've all gotten there because they've been appointed by the people who are paid by the corporations. So we have to, it's a spiritual problem. It's a spiritual challenge, and it's a spiritual answer to this. And so we all have to try to strengthen our own personal spiritual consciousness, and then work together and come together like this with people who have affection for each other and respect for each other to try to work on the details of how to do this. But I think that if we all join together in strengthening our own spiritual capacities through this very specific process that's been revealed to us by the great masters all the way through the centuries, that it's there. Sit down, do the meditation, get into that state of consciousness, and come together to discuss this. That's what we're doing here this weekend. So that's what my advice is, that we need to keep this up and become the architects of a new, genuinely new paradigm.
So drawing on the strength of these two men that we've just heard talking about a different kind of battle, in a way, I just invite all the men in the audience to embrace one of our responsibilities, which is to provide a safe, protected space for the feminine. And that's in an obvious way for women, but also for the feminine within ourselves. But I'm aware we have two very courageous women on the stage here. It looks, Jennifer, like you have something to add.
I was just going to ask Daniel if instead of meditating, we could all just take LSD.
Well, it's an interesting issue.
Must have been really good LSD.
I know that when I was asked to help work on the kind of plan for a new paradigm academy that some people have been offering to put together and have us assemble a whole set of instructions on these alternative worldviews and the philosophies, theologies, et cetera, that we have to face this question that if you have young students coming to your school to learn about all of this stuff, and you spend all this time trying to get them to change their diet and meditate and do all that kind of stuff, and people say, well, why don't you just put LSD in the water or something, and have it raises that question again of forcing someone to do something that other than is voluntary at all. And I remember I was having this discussion with Georgie Zimmer. It was a very dear friend of mine, the man who owns the men's warehouses. I Guarantee It, Georgie. And Georgie had never done LSD, and still has never done it. And I was talking to him, and I said to him, what do you think is the kind of highest achievement that you can actually achieve in what you're trying to do? He said, I've always thought that, and this won't offend him, but he said that the idea of getting up at the bottom of the ninth inning with 2 outs and the bases loaded, and it's the end of the World Series, and you get up and you hit a home run over the fence, and as you're running around the base pads one at a time, and everybody's cheering, and you've won the World Series, he said, I can't imagine any higher experience than that. This opened the issue of LSD. And I asked him, I explained to him what had happened to me when this had happened, and he said, no, he said, I'm not going to do that until after I retire. He said, and I said, well, why would you not? And he said, I'm afraid that it would interfere with my relationship with my desires. And I said, that it would. That it would. So we have to, I think, figure out how to assist people voluntarily coming to this practice of meditation and diet and other kind of things, but not be afraid to tell people about this type of experience that we have that is also in some ways available through the mushrooms and the psilocybin and the ayahuasca. That I'm legal counsel actually for the ayahuasca church in the United States here, but so that there are different ways that the indigenous people of the world have tried to share this knowledge of kind of different levels of consciousness and ways of getting there. And the shamans and the mystics and the Hindus and the others. There are differing ways that we can get to this type of experience together and use it as a referent, a tuning fork for what is harmonious or disharmonious with the natural order of the universe. But I think we have to, again, all try to share these experiences, not be afraid of acknowledging the ways in which any of us have had access to these kind of experiences, and try to figure out that the people who are attempting to make it unlawful and criminalize it and all of those, they are the most fearful because they're afraid that if in fact people come to realize our genuine relationship with the universe and the world, that we will not reify those artificial structures that they have imposed upon us. So that's what we have to do. Yeah.
Well, Mary, I've just met you for the first time this weekend, and on several occasions I've felt that you really were bringing a lot of courage into the room. And, you know, the image of a home run and so forth is pretty masculine. I love it myself, but there's a different kind of power that comes through the feminine. And if you're willing, I'd love you to say a little more about not exactly what makes you tick, but how are you able to be so courageous and do what you do relative to the forces in the world that we're all dealing with?
Well, I guess I never think of myself as courageous. Actually, I think of myself sometimes as a little fearful. So that's a surprise to me. But, you know, when you have an experience of truth, I think fear falls away. And so, you know, I haven't had LSD, so I haven't had that experience.
We haven't left yet here.
There's always a first time.
Danny is making the tea tonight.
But I will say that I've had experiences that I think maybe equivalent. And one of the most wonderful experiences of my life is, well, part of the reason I share what I share and what you see as courage, but what I just see as something that I've been given to share. So let me explain that a little bit, because I think it's an important thing. When I was in college, I was first exposed to libertarian ideas, and, you know, I had that aha moment, almost euphoria, because I think when you lose ignorance, your consciousness elevates. And then later, when I was reading about our foreign policy, I had a very strong sense of what I would call revelation, because there's really no other word for that. And I saw the libertarian philosophy, the practicality of our world, and our spiritual commitment all come together and form a unity. And once I did that, I was really on cloud 9, because I could see that we're hardwired for liberty. And it's such a strong hardwiring that our biological imperative for evolution is to embrace it. And just because we aren't embracing it now doesn't mean we won't. In fact, we're almost, the way this all came to me is we're almost slated to do it, to have a future of liberty as long as we don't blow ourselves up first, which I admit is a possibility. And I was so blown away by this that I spent the next week, I couldn't get the smile off my face, because it was such a wonderful thing, and I wanted to share it. I mean, the only thing you can do with something like that is to share it. And so first I tried to make a little video about it, and I realized it wasn't deep enough, so then instead I wrote Healing Our World with the help of my sister Marty. And I had trouble because the vision I had wasn't in English. You know, it was sort of it wasn't even a picture, it was a knowing. And I was trying to communicate this to my sister, and since we were very close, even though I stumbled over my words, she got it. And she said, "Mary, you were born to write that book." And she helped me through it because I would send it to her in California. I was in Michigan at the time. And she would send it back with so much red ink. There was often more red ink than black ink because she understood the vision. And she said, "No, this sounds too technical. You know, this isn't what you want, or, you know, this could be said better, or the logic flow could be different." So the success of that book and even the things I share with you and the logic flow are partially due to her. And when she got ill and I became her caregiver, we actually went through a lot of the aggression through government that we wrote about in the book. It was only a year after it was published, and she eventually asked me to take her to Dr. Kevorkian, and I did. But even then, there was such, I don't know if I can explain this well, but the 5 years of writing Healing with her was so elating. It was we were at such a high level that even though it was difficult because I was working full-time at Upjohn and running a family business in real estate, somehow the time came to finish it. And somehow, even with Marty's death, it seemed like we were still working together, because afterwards there was a lot of media blowback from her death. And I could hear her saying, "Mary, I can't deal with this now, but you can. Go and tell them the real story." And so I did. When you have that many years of that much elation and experience, it doesn't seem like you need LSD. At least at the moment. Now, that could change. But what I want to share with you is there's a certain elevation of consciousness when you get a piece of truth. And in fact, you know, when I've worked with libertarians throughout the years, many of them have become discouraged because they went from being blissfully ignorant to recognizing how much our system needs, maybe more than tweaking, but needs some serious work. And when they've tried to share the message, they've been discouraged by the way their family and friends react. But I asked them, I said, if you could turn back the clock, would you want to go back to blissful ignorance? And not one of them wanted to. And the reason is ignorance is not blissful. When you let go of ignorance, your consciousness elevates. And so that's what all this exploration that we're doing here is intended to do. You know, the aha moment I think both Foster and I talked about earlier, and I'm sure has been part of the experience of all the panelists here, is something we all crave without knowing it. We want our consciousness elevated, and we have to let go of ignorance, so we have to challenge ourselves, and sometimes it's pretty painful. I know when I was working on healing, although I was at a very elevated level in terms of working on it, I had to deal with my fears. I had to deal with my concern that I wasn't doing a good enough job. You know, all those insecurities. I had never written a book before. In fact, I hadn't done anything but technical writing for a long time, and this had to be different. And I was writing about something I never wrote about before. Even looking back, I don't know how I decided I could do it, but I just knew I had to, so I did. And that's why all of us here are encouraging you when you go back home to really examine, you know, what your beliefs are around all of this, because ignorance is not bliss. It's the blockade to elevating our consciousness. So I really encourage you and support you in that effort. Thank you.
Well, that's a remarkable redefinition of courage, is the elevation of consciousness. which is what we've been doing all weekend. So we're leaving a lot more courageous than we arrived. And it reminded me, Joel, of what you were speaking of, if you have more to add, about real existence is eternal. Because we've gone down into a consideration of death here, and all of us in different ways have touched on it. And there's a tender feeling in the room, which I feel is as it should be. We're nearing the end of our physical time together. So I'd love you to keep taking us a little higher, but going deeper into this truth you introduced, that real existence is eternal.
At the root of all the problems we have on our planet is the separation mentality. That we're not all one in this, and that we're not all connected to the source of all life, the source of all consciousness. And we are enmeshed in a type of illusion that we are separate and that we need to fear each other. The fact that we have a physical organism that we identify ourselves with, and it's a false identity, is the source of that primal fear of loss. We're afraid that the organism that we identify with is under constant bombardment, constant threat. If we can see ourselves as we are in truth, which is an eternal being with a high and holy purpose, then we can let go of that fear and realize that the holy purpose of our body is loving communication, which is what is required for the healing of the separation. That's it.
There have been a series of amazing sound bites through the weekend, and we just had a wonderful one from Nassim a little while back in time, where he really opened his amazing reservoir of awareness about stars and the fact that stars don't die, and neither do you. And Nassim, I'd love you to just expand a little bit on that. We're nearing the end here, because it's such an amazing scope to connect as stars and embrace our immortality, our transformation, yes, but our immortality. And if you'd grace us with more depth on that, it'd be wonderful.
Thank you. You know, I think that in some ways we tend to have this sense that there is a certain amount of relationships in our lives that defines us, so that we tend to experience ourselves through the eyes of others, like how others perceive us. And you know, this might sound far from the subject you asked me to talk about, but I think that it's related in the sense that what I'm trying to bring us back to, or myself, you know, trying to bring myself back to, is this essence at the source of existence. This essence that cannot be dominated, that cannot be judged on, that cannot be imprisoned, whatever it is, its circumstances. That that even in an isolation cell, 6 foot underground or whatever the case may be, you know, that essence is connected, it's free, it's naturally in a state of freedom and in a state of in a state in which life flows, in a state in which, you know, joy emerge, and that's present in whatever, you know, the experiences, including the experience of feeling like life is leaving, right? And that, you know, I've been there, and I've been there in many different ways, but certainly I've been there in moments of, you know, when you're soloing and you're thousands of feet up on this amazing crystal, and you're soloing, so there's no error possible. So, and you get up within a place where you know, it's like your mind start to wander, and you're wondering. Mind is not. It's making a future assumption about how the universe or how the world is relating to you. That is, you're actually seeing yourself messing up this next move, and you're seeing yourself, you know, because of all the things that have been told to you and all the ways that you've seen people interpret you and all this, that you always mess up. So you're gonna mess up this next move. And as you're thinking about this, right, you start sweating. You know, your hands actually get wet, and you actually are slipping. You know, and you will be manifesting that. You know, you will manifest, and to return, and in that moment is a very, very specific choice. And that choice is not to overcome, but to actually return to the source of joy, right? Because if I return in that moment, and I've had to do that a bunch of times, more times than I care for, to return to that moment of joy inside of me means to return to, wow, what an amazing day. What an amazing crystal I'm on. What an amazing moment I'm experiencing. And right away, my hand dries up. And of course I make that move because I'm having a wonderful, wonderful day, right? And so this, the reason I'm saying this is because it really kind of like, for me, is this sense that at the deepest level of us is this amazing life force that's driving us into this transformative experience we call life. And when I'm experiencing that at its most powerful level is when I'm in complete gratitude of the experience, whatever the experience is. And in some cases, it can be a very difficult experience, but I can still find gratitude because I know this terrible experience I'm having is actually making me grow and transform and become, you know, more accurate and better at what I do and so on. And so, you know, to be able to remember that when we're at the deepest level of despair, you know, when we're in the most difficult moment, is something that I trained for because I'm not that good at it, right? And so I train for it because I want to be there when it's tough. I want to find that when it's tough. And if I can't do that when I do, I can see the transformation of the people around me too. Because it kind of emanates from me. and people feel it. You know, be like a proton, be positive.
So we've had an opportunity to hear from all the panelists, but I feel that we owe a couple more minutes to Jennifer, who introduced a topic that we followed here. I just met Jennifer here, but she seems to be a very disruptive person. And I say that as a compliment, in the deepest sense. I feel that there's something Jennifer constellates that is a real lesson for all of us to dare to disrupt. And I think we can all be a little timid about that. We can get slapped down when we speak our truth, and it may not go over well with the status quo. But I just really wanted to honor that quality in you. You're laughing, so you know what I'm saying. But if there's anything you'd like to add just to complete our time, I'd love to give you the chance.
So what I really want to say, which I won't, is that I desperately need to go to the bathroom.
See what I mean?
And that it's exactly 5 o'clock, and I believe in ending on time.
Great.
But I'll try to do a little better than that in like one
Just
sentence.
hurry through it, so we don't have any problem here.
But I think that yesterday you said that not, relieving your bladder when you need to was the ultimate recycling. So
Yes.
I want you all to appreciate that I am recycling as we speak. So in my panel this afternoon, somebody said, I had an incredible audience, I have to say, like incredible participants, not audience. And everyone in this room brings so much to this conversation. I just want to mention that. But one person said, I realize that I really need to give everything. I need to give 100%, that 99% isn't enough. And I think everyone in the room felt kind of like, yes, we all want to give 100%. And I said, but I want to agree with you that we need to give 100%, and I want to tell you all that my motto is also that anything worth doing is worth doing half-assed. And in a way, I just want to put that out there as a thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That is a Hegelian dialectic that we can embrace. That I think everyone in this room and everyone on this panel really does try to give 100%. And I will be the first to admit that I make a lot of mistakes all the time, and I'm not right about everything, and I'm constantly wanting to learn and striving to do better. So I want to encourage you to give 100% and also to know that anything worth doing is worth doing half-assed.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here, and I think Joel may have an announcement or two at the end, but we're going to flip the script here just in the closing moments, being respectful of Jennifer needing to get to the bathroom. And have we received a lot from these friends here? Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Perkins, Jennifer Margulis, Nassim Haramein, Danny Sheehan, Will Wilkinson, Mary Ruwart, and Foster Gamble.
The audience.
So applause is a wonderful way to honor people. Another way is a little more energetically, and I've been observing my friends here through the weekend very carefully, and I've come up with a couple of words for each of them. So if you will, I'd love you to focus your energy of appreciation for them through these words, which I hope represent them. John?
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I'm really honored to be among you guys. thank you for having me, and among all of you. So thank you so much.
Yeah. So, John, I've experienced you being inspiring and kind. And Joel, powerful and caring. And Mary, courageous and gentle. Nassim, cosmic and hilarious. Daniel, masterful and compassionate. Jennifer, brilliant and loving. Foster, devoted and wise. And there's one other leader we need to honor. Jordan, where are you? Jordan? So, this is... I don't know if you all know this, but Jordan's parents are here. Are they still here? Well, Jordan's parents were here, and I think that's so amazing. They were here to honor their son, to see him in action. And the two words that I came up with for Jordan, which really seem to fit, are responsible and respectful. So thank you. And thank you all.
We certainly would like to acknowledge Jordan's key staff, Lori Lorenz. Where are you, Lori? Yes. Julie Drawbeck. Where's Julie? Yes, Julie. Yes, definitely. Thank you. Thank you. Our wonderful AV technicians, Andy and Susie. Great job, guys. And all of the conference staff volunteers, please stand up wherever you are here. Amazing job. Thank you all very much. Thank you. And to our beautiful audience here, our participants, our new architects of the new paradigm, all of you here, thank you. Thank you.
Yay for the audience. Thank you. Thank you.